You ever notice how the world laughs at discipline until it fears it? They'll call you boring, obsessive, too serious. Because while they're busy chasing comfort, you're quietly building control. And that scares them. You see, chaos is loud, weakness is easy. But a discipline is silent. It doesn't beg for attention, it takes power. Most people don't fail because they're stupid. They fail because they can't control themselves. One distraction, one excuse, one more delay, and just like that, they lose. But you're here for something different, aren't you? Because the moment you master self-discipline, you don't just improve your life, you become dangerous. Not to others, but to your old self, your limits, your excuses. And trust me, once you cross that line, there's no going back. Most people think they're in control of their lives, but if you look closely, it's the small impulses that are really in charge. The urge to check your phone, the need to delay something uncomfortable, the habit of choosing what feels good instead of what actually matters. These are the quiet forces shaping your future. And the dangerous part is, they don't feel like enemies. They feel normal. That's how control slips away without you even noticing. Every time you give in to distraction, you're training your mind to be weaker, not in some dramatic, obvious way, but slowly, almost invisibly. You start to depend on motivation instead of discipline, and motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like a mood. So when things get hard, and they always do, you fall back into comfort. That's where most people stay. Stuck in a loop they don't even realize they're trapped in. The truth is, the world doesn't need to control you if you can't control yourself. Opportunities pass by because you weren't ready. Time disappears because you didn't value it. Other people move ahead, not because they're better, but because they're more consistent. And consistency comes from control. Not talent, not luck. Control. Self-control isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware. It's catching yourself in the moment when you're about to make the easy choice and choosing differently. It's waking up when you don't feel like it. It's doing the work when no one is watching. It's staying focused when everything around you is trying to pull you away. That's where real power starts to build. Most people wait for the right moment, the perfect mood, the sudden burst of inspiration. But those are just excuses dressed up to look acceptable. The reality is, control means acting even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. Because that's the moment that separates you from who you used to be. And once you start gaining control, something shifts. You stop reacting to everything around you. You stop being easily influenced. Your decisions become intentional instead of emotional. You begin to realize that you're not a victim of your circumstances. You're a product of your choices. That realization is uncomfortable, but it's also freeing. There's a certain silence that comes with self-control. You don't need to announce your goals. You don't need validation. You just move differently. While others are talking, you're doing. While others are distracted, you're focused. While others are quitting, you're continuing. And over time, that difference becomes impossible to ignore. Losing control is easy because it requires nothing. Anyone can drift, procrastinate, and make excuses. But taking control requires effort, awareness, and discipline. It's not flashy, it's not exciting, but it's what builds everything that actually lasts. And the more control you gain, the harder it becomes for anything external to shake you. Pressure, opinions, distractions, they lose their power over you. Because you've already faced the hardest thing yourself. Comfort feels harmless in the moment. It whispers instead of demands. It tells you to rest a little longer, scroll a little more, delay just this once. Nothing about it feels dangerous. In fact, it feels deserved. But that's exactly why it wins so often. It doesn't attack your goals directly. It slowly replaces them with easier choices until you forget what you were chasing in the first place. The problem isn't comfort itself. It's the addiction to it. When you start prioritizing what feels good over what actually matters, your standards begin to drop without you noticing. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow, that you'll push harder later, that you just need the right mood. But the truth is, every time you choose comfort over discipline, you reinforce a pattern. And patterns, once repeated enough, become your identity. Discipline doesn't feel good at the start. It feels heavy, inconvenient, even frustrating. It asks you to act when your mind is full of resistance. It forces you to face things you'd rather avoid. That's why most people run from it. They think something is wrong because it feels uncomfortable, when in reality, that discomfort is the signal that you're doing something meaningful. There's a quiet battle happening every day between these two forces. Comfort tells you to stay the same. Discipline pushes you to grow. One keeps you safe, the other makes you stronger, and every small decision tips the balance. Skipping one task, avoiding one responsibility, choosing distraction once, it all adds up. Not in a dramatic way, but in a slow shift that changes the direction of your life. People often look at success and assume it comes from big, bold actions. But more often, it comes from the ability to consistently reject comfort in small moments. It's saying no when it would be easier to say yes. It's continuing when it would be easier to stop. It's staying focused when your mind is begging for escape. These aren't glamorous choices, but they're the ones that separate those who grow from those who stay stuck. Comfort convinces you that you have time, that you can afford to wait. But time doesn't pause just because you're not ready. While you're hesitating, someone else is moving. While you're delaying, someone else is building. And the gap between you and them isn't talent, it's discipline. At first, choosing discipline feels like loss. You lose ease, you lose instant pleasure, you lose that temporary sense of relief. But over time, it flips. Discipline starts giving you more than comfort ever could. It gives you control, confidence, and progress. It builds a version of you that doesn't need to rely on mood or motivation. And that version of you is hard to stop. There's a point where you start to see comfort differently. Not as something to chase, but as something to manage. You stop letting it dictate your actions. You begin to recognize its voice and choose not to listen. That's when things change. Not because the work gets easier, but because you get stronger. And the truth is, comfort will always be there. It doesn't disappear when you become disciplined. It just loses its power over you. The difference is you stop negotiating with it. You stop giving it control over your decisions. Because you've realized something most people don't. What feels good now often costs you later. And what feels hard now often builds you into someone better. Most people underestimate how powerful their daily habits really are. They think success or failure comes from big decisions, rare opportunities, or sudden changes. But in reality, it's the small things you repeat every day that shape everything. The way you start your morning, how you respond to discomfort, what you do when no one is watching. These quiet actions are constantly building something. The only question is whether they're building you or slowly breaking you down. Habits don't feel important in the moment. Skipping one workout doesn't seem like a big deal. Wasting an hour scrolling feels harmless. Choosing the easy option just once feels justified. But habits aren't about single moments. They're about patterns. And patterns don't show their consequences immediately. They wait. They grow in the background until one day the results become impossible to ignore. The dangerous part is that destructive habits are often comfortable. They give you instant relief, quick pleasure, or temporary escape. That's why they're so easy to repeat. Your mind starts to crave them, not because they're good for you, but because they're easy. And over time, you don't even question them anymore. They become automatic. You stop choosing them consciously, and that's when they gain real control. On the other side, the habits that build you usually feel harder at the start. They require effort, focus, and consistency. They don't give instant rewards. In fact, they often feel like a sacrifice. But what they lack in immediate gratification, they make up for in long-term impact. They slowly strengthen your discipline, sharpen your mindset, and create momentum that keeps pushing you forward. Every habit you repeat is casting a vote for the person you're becoming. You might not see the change right away, but it's happening. With every disciplined action, you're reinforcing a stronger version of yourself. With every careless choice, you're feeding a weaker one. And over time, one side starts to dominate. People often wait for motivation to fix their lives, but motivation doesn't control habits. Habits control behavior. If your habits are weak, your results will be inconsistent. If your habits are strong, your progress becomes almost automatic. You don't need to think about it. You don't need to rely on willpower every time. You just follow the system you've built. There's also a hidden identity behind every habit. When you repeat something long enough, it stops being something you do and starts becoming who you are. You're not just someone who occasionally procrastinates. You become someone who avoids responsibility. You're not just someone who sometimes works hard. You become someone who shows up no matter what. That shift in identity is powerful, because once something becomes part of who you are, it's much harder to break. Most people try to change their lives by making big promises, setting extreme goals, or waiting for the perfect moment. But real change doesn't come from intensity. It comes from consistency. It's not about doing everything at once. It's about doing the right things repeatedly, even when it feels boring, even when it feels slow. And the truth is, your future is already being built by what you're doing today. Not by what you plan to do, not by what you say you'll do, but by what you actually repeat. Every habit is either pushing you forward or pulling you back. There is no neutral. Even standing still is a form of moving, just in the wrong direction. Noise is everywhere. People talking, notifications flashing, opinions flooding in from every direction. It's constant, overwhelming, and addictive. Most people don't even realize how much of their life is controlled by it. They wake up and immediately reach for distraction. They fill every quiet moment with something: music, scrolling, conversations, anything to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. And in that noise, they lose focus, direction, and control. Silence, on the other hand, feels uncomfortable. It forces you to confront yourself. No distractions, no excuses, just your thoughts, your habits, your reality. That's why people avoid it. But the truth is, silence is where clarity begins. It's where you start to see what actually matters and what's just noise pulling you away from your goals. Consistency is built in that silence. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's the quiet decision to show up every day, even when no one is watching. It's doing the work without needing validation, without needing immediate results. Most people quit because they don't see progress fast enough. They expect something big, something obvious. But real growth doesn't work like that. It builds slowly, almost invisibly, until one day the results speak for themselves. Relentless focus is what protects that consistency. Without it, you get pulled in every direction. One distraction turns into another, and suddenly hours are gone. Days pass and nothing meaningful gets done. Focus isn't just about working hard. It's about knowing what deserves your attention and what doesn't. It's about cutting off what doesn't serve you, even if it's entertaining, even if it's comfortable. There's a certain discipline in choosing silence over noise. It means saying no to things that don't align with your goals. It means stepping away from constant stimulation and creating space to think, to plan, to act with intention. Most people fear missing out, so they stay connected to everything. But in trying to be everywhere, they end up accomplishing nothing. Consistency without focus leads to wasted effort. You might be working, but not on the right things. You might be busy, but not productive. That's where most people get stuck. They confuse movement with progress. They fill their time but don't move forward. Relentless focus fixes that. It directs your energy toward what actually matters again and again until results become inevitable. The combination of silence, consistency, and focus creates a kind of power that's hard to compete with. While others are distracted, you're building. While others are inconsistent, you're steady. While others are looking for shortcuts, you're putting in the work. And over time, that difference becomes undeniable. It's not exciting. It's not glamorous. In fact, it can feel repetitive and even isolating. But that's what makes it rare. Most people don't have the patience or discipline to stay in that space. They need constant stimulation, constant change. They chase quick wins and lose interest when things slow down. But when you embrace silence, you start to hear what actually matters. When you stay consistent, you create momentum that carries you forward. And when you protect your focus, you make sure that effort isn't wasted. These aren't separate ideas. They work together, reinforcing each other. And the more you practice them, the less you depend on external factors. You don't need motivation. You don't need approval. You don't need perfect conditions. You operate on a different level, one where your actions are controlled by discipline, not distractions. Excuses rarely sound like excuses when you hear them in your own head. They sound reasonable, justified, even logical. I'm tired. I'll start tomorrow. I just need the right moment. Each one feels small, harmless on its own. But that's how they work. They don't stop you all at once. They slow you down just enough to keep you from ever moving forward. Every excuse is a decision disguised as a delay. It gives you temporary comfort while quietly taking something from your future. Time, energy, opportunities. Things you don't notice losing until they're already gone. And the more you repeat these patterns, the easier it becomes to rely on them. You stop questioning yourself. You start accepting mediocrity as normal. The dangerous part is that excuses protect your ego. They give you a way to avoid responsibility. Instead of admitting that you didn't try hard enough, you blame circumstances. Instead of facing your weaknesses, you cover them with reasons. It feels safer in the moment, but it keeps you stuck. Growth requires honesty, and excuses are the opposite of that. There's always a reason not to act. Conditions are never perfect. You'll never feel completely ready. If you wait for everything to align, you'll be waiting forever. The people who move forward aren't the ones with the best conditions. They're the ones who act despite them. They don't waste time negotiating with their excuses. They recognize them and move anyway. At first, breaking this pattern feels uncomfortable. You're going against habits that have been built over time. Your mind will resist. It will try to pull you back into what's familiar. It will tell you that you've done enough, that you deserve a break, that you can afford to wait. But those thoughts aren't guiding you, they're holding you back. Excuses often come from fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough. Instead of confronting those fears directly, it's easier to avoid action altogether. But avoiding action doesn't remove the fear, it strengthens it. The longer you delay, the bigger it becomes. And eventually, it controls you. Taking responsibility changes everything. The moment you stop blaming external factors and start owning your choices, you gain control. It's not easy, and it's not comfortable, but it's powerful. Because if your results are a product of your actions, then changing your actions means changing your future. There's a certain clarity that comes when you stop making excuses. Decisions become simpler. You either do the work or you don't. You either follow through or you don't. There's no middle ground, no gray area to hide in. That level of honesty can feel harsh, but it removes confusion. It forces you to see things as they are, not as you wish they were. And over time, something shifts. The voice that used to make excuses gets quieter. Not because it disappears, but because you stop listening to it. You build a habit of action instead of avoidance. You start trusting yourself more because you know you'll follow through. The truth is, excuses don't just delay your progress. They shape your identity. If you keep choosing them, you become someone who avoids, someone who hesitates, someone who stays stuck. But when you start rejecting them, even in small moments, you begin to change. You become someone who acts, someone who pushes forward, someone who takes control.